Madonna was performing Express Yourself when she noticed an elderly woman dancing alone in the front row, tears streaming down her face. When security told Madonna why this grandmother had waited 40 years for this moment, the pop icon made a decision that stopped the show. It was July 23, 2023, at Madison Square Garden in New York City. Madonna's celebration tour was in full swing, and the arena was packed with 20,000 screaming fans. The energy was electric, as Madonna powered through one of her most iconic anthems about female empowerment and self-worth. But something caught her eye during the second verse. In the front row, center stage, an elderly woman with silver hair was dancing with an intensity that seemed impossible for someone her age. She was wearing a vintage 1984, like a Virgin Tour t-shirt, and tears were running down her weathered face as she moved to the music. Madonna had seen thousands of emotional fans over her 4-decade career, but there was something different about this woman, something that made her look twice. The woman's name was Dorothy Chen, and she was 82 years old. What Madonna didn't know yet was that Dorothy had been waiting for this moment since 1984, when she was a 43-year-old mother of 3, who made a choice that would haunt her family for 40 years. In 1984, Dorothy was living in a strict Chinese-American household in Queens, New York. Her parents had immigrated from Taiwan in the 1950s, bringing with them traditional values about family, respect, and what they considered appropriate behavior for women. Dorothy had married young, had 3 children by the time she was 30, and spent her days working at her family's restaurant while raising her kids. That year, Madonna burst onto the scene with Like a Virgin, and Dorothy became secretly obsessed. There was something about Madonna's message of independence and self-expression that spoke to a part of Dorothy she'd buried for decades. She would listen to Madonna on her Walkman while doing dishes late at night, keeping the volume low so her husband wouldn't hear. One day, Dorothy's teenage daughter Linda discovered her mother's cassette tapes hidden in the back of a kitchen drawer. Linda, excited to bond with her mum, played Material Girl loudly in the living room. That's when Dorothy's mother-in-law walked in. The reaction was immediate and severe. Dorothy's mother-in-law called a family meeting that same evening. In front of Dorothy's husband, her 3 children, and her own parents. Dorothy was accused of bringing shameful Western corruption into their home. Her mother-in-law held up the Madonna cassette, like it was evidence in a trial. This woman, her mother-in-law had said, pointing at Madonna's image on the cassette, "She dresses like a prostitute. She has no respect for family or tradition. And you are listening to this garbage." Dorothy tried to defend herself. She explained that Madonna's music made her feel alive, made her feel like she could be more than just someone's wife and mother. But her words only made things worse. Her husband, Daniel, gave her an ultimatum that night. "It's Madonna or this family." Dorothy looked at her 3 young children, at her aging parents who depended on her, at the life she'd built, and she made the choice that millions of women throughout history have made. She chose to stay silent. She chose to be who everyone else needed her to be. The next morning, Dorothy burned her Madonna cassettes in the backyard while her mother-in-law watched to make sure she did it. For the next 40 years, Dorothy never listened to Madonna again. She raised her children, worked at the restaurant, and eventually helped raise her 7 grandchildren. She became the perfect traditional grandmother that her family expected her to be. But something inside her never stopped dancing. Her daughter Linda never forgot what happened that day in 1984. As Linda grew older, got married, and had children of her own, she began to understand what her mother had sacrificed. She saw how her mother's eyes would glaze over sometimes, as if she was somewhere else. She noticed how her mother would occasionally hum a tune, then quickly stop herself. In 2022, Linda's own daughter Emma, Dorothy's 24-year-old granddaughter, came out as gay. The family's reaction was mixed, with some of the older generation struggling to accept it. But Dorothy surprised everyone. She was the first person to embrace Emma, to tell her that living authentically was the most important thing in life. "Don't make the same mistake I did," Dorothy had whispered to Emma that day. "Don't let anyone make you smaller than you are." That's when Emma learned the story about Madonna, and 1984, Linda told her daughter everything, and Emma made a decision. She was going to give her grandmother the moment that had been stolen from her 40 years ago. Emma worked 3 jobs to save money for front-row tickets to Madonna's celebration tour. It took her 11 months, but she did it. She bought 3 tickets, one for Dorothy, one for Linda, and one for herself. 3 generations of women going to see Madonna together. The problem was convincing Dorothy to go. At 82, Dorothy was terrified. What if her husband found out? What if the older relatives discovered what she'd done? Even though her mother-in-law had passed away years ago, the fear was still there. "Grandma," Emma had said, "you've spent 40 years being who everyone else wanted you to be. Just this once, be who you want to be." So there Dorothy was, standing in the front row at Madison Square Garden, wearing that vintage t-shirt that Emma had found on eBay. For the first 45 minutes of the concert, Dorothy stood relatively still, overwhelmed by the music, the lights, the fact that she was actually here. But then Madonna started singing "Express Yourself," and something broke open inside Dorothy. All those years of silence, all those moments of making herself smaller, all that music she'd never allowed herself to hear, it all came pouring out. She started dancing like she was 43 again, like she had nothing to lose, like she was finally free. That's when Madonna noticed her. Madonna stopped singing mid-verse and walked to the edge of the stage, looking directly at Dorothy. The music kept playing, but Madonna wasn't singing. She was just staring at this elderly woman who was dancing with such raw, uncontained joy. Madonna gestured to her security chief, who quickly ran over. The music continued as Madonna spoke into his ear, pointing at Dorothy. The security chief nodded and made his way through the crowd to where Dorothy, Linda, and Emma were standing. "Ma'am," the security chief said to Dorothy, "Madonna wants to know your story." Dorothy, overwhelmed and confused, could barely speak. But Linda stepped in. She quickly explained everything. 1984, the family meeting, the ultimatum, the 40 years of silence, the secret that had been kept for so long. The security chief spoke into his radio, relaying the information back to Madonna's team. On stage, Madonna was still standing at the edge, watching Dorothy, waiting. When the security chief finished speaking into his radio, he looked back at Madonna. Even from the front row, Dorothy could see Madonna's expression change. Her eyes became glassy. She put her hand over her heart. Madonna made a hand signal to her band, and the music slowly faded out. 20,000 people fell silent, sensing that something extraordinary was happening. "I need everyone to listen to me right now," Madonna said into her microphone, her voice uncharacteristically soft. "There's a woman here tonight who's been waiting 40 years to be at one of my shows." The arena was completely silent now. Every eye was on Madonna. 40 years ago, her family told her she had to choose between my music and them. They told her that loving my music made her shameful, that it made her a bad mother, a bad wife, a bad woman. Dorothy felt Emma squeeze her hand. "And you know what she did?" Madonna continued, her voice growing stronger. She chose them. She chose to be quiet. She chose to be small, because that's what women like us were taught to do. We were taught that our joy didn't matter, that our self-expression was selfish, that wanting to be ourselves was a sin. Madonna wiped her eyes, and Dorothy realized that the Queen of Pop was crying. But tonight, at 82 years old, she's here, she's dancing, and she's wearing a t-shirt from my 1984 tour. Madonna laughed through her tears. "Mom, can you come up here? Please?" Dorothy felt paralyzed. Emma and Linda were gently pushing her forward. Security was helping her navigate through the barrier, and before she knew what was happening, Dorothy Chen was being helped up the stairs to the stage at Madison Square Garden. The crowd erupted in applause, but Madonna held up her hand for silence. "What's your name, sweetheart?" Madonna asked gently. "Dorothy," she managed to say, her voice barely audible even through the microphone Madonna held to her lips. "Dorothy, I want you to know something," Madonna said, taking both of Dorothy's hands in hers. "Every woman who ever chose herself over what people expected her to be, she did it because of women like you. Women who couldn't make that choice. Women who sacrificed their joy so their children could have the freedom to someday choose differently." Dorothy was sobbing now. 40 years of held-back tears finally flowing free. "You didn't fail," Madonna continued. "You survived, and now you're here, and baby, it's time to dance." Madonna gestured to her band, and they started playing Express Yourself from the beginning. But this time Madonna wasn't singing alone. She put her arm around Dorothy's shoulders, and together they sang. Dorothy's voice was shaky and off-key, but she sang every single word perfectly. She'd known the lyrics all along, even after 40 years of silence. The crowd went absolutely wild. 20,000 people were on their feet, crying, cheering, and singing along with an 82-year-old grandmother who was finally getting her moment. In the front row, Linda and Emma were holding each other, both crying so hard they could barely see the stage. 3 generations of women, all of them finally understanding what it meant to choose yourself. Madonna and Dorothy danced together for the entire song. Madonna spun her around, held her steady when she got dizzy, and the whole time both women were laughing and crying at the same time. When the song ended, Madonna hugged Dorothy for a long moment. Then she spoke into her microphone one more time. "This show isn't just for the young people who think they're discovering freedom for the first time," Madonna said. "This show is for every woman who never got to have her moment. Every woman who was told she was too much or not enough. Every woman who chose silence because it was safer than being herself." She turned to Dorothy. "You are Express Yourself, Dorothy. You always were." Madonna's team brought Dorothy backstage after the song, where she sat with Linda and Emma in the VIP area for the rest of the concert. Madonna sent them champagne and a note that simply said, "Thank you for waiting for me." But the story doesn't end there. When Dorothy got home that night, her husband Daniel was waiting up for her. He'd seen videos of the concert on social media. The whole world had seen his wife on stage with Madonna. Dorothy prepared herself for another ultimatum, another choice, another moment of having to make herself small. Instead, Daniel stood up from his chair and said 6 words that Dorothy had been waiting 40 years to hear. "I should have let you dance." He'd spent the evening reading comments online about Dorothy's story. Thousands of people, sharing their own stories of sacrifice and silence. Daniel had realized that the woman he'd forced to choose wasn't the woman he'd wanted to protect. She was the woman he'd been afraid to know. "I'm sorry," Daniel said. "I'm 40 years too late, but I'm sorry." Dorothy and Daniel didn't solve 40 years of pain in one conversation, but that night, for the first time in their 58-year marriage, they talked about who Dorothy really was. Not the daughter-in-law, not the mother, not the grandmother, just Dorothy. 3 weeks after the concert, Dorothy did something she'd never done before. She went to a dance class at the local community center. It was a beginner's class, mostly younger women, but Dorothy didn't care. She was there to move, to express, to finally take up space. The instructor, a woman in her 30s, recognized Dorothy from the viral videos. "Oh my God, you're the Madonna grandma." Dorothy smiled. "No," she said. "I'm just Dorothy, and I'm here to dance." Madonna later said in an interview that Dorothy's story was one of the most important moments of her entire career. "I spent 40 years telling women to express themselves," Madonna said. "But Dorothy taught me that sometimes survival is the bravest form of self-expression." She kept that spark alive inside her for 4 decades, waiting for the moment she could finally let it burn. Today, Dorothy is 83 years old. She goes to dance class twice a week, plays Madonna on her phone without hiding it, and has become something of a local celebrity in her Queens neighborhood. She gives talks at community centers about finding yourself at any age. Her granddaughter Emma says that Dorothy has changed completely. "She's lighter now," Emma explains. "Like she's been carrying something heavy for my entire life, and she finally put it down." Dorothy still has that vintage 1984 tour t-shirt. She had it framed, along with a photo of her and Madonna on stage together. It hangs in her living room, where everyone can see it. But the most important change isn't what Dorothy displays on her walls. It's what she finally allowed herself to believe, that her joy matters, that her self-expression isn't selfish, that choosing herself doesn't mean abandoning everyone else. At 82, Dorothy Chen finally learned to express herself, and in doing so she gave 3 generations of women in her family permission to do the same. If this story of courage, self-expression, and the power of waiting for your moment moved you, hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Share it with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to choose yourself. Have you ever had to wait years for a moment of freedom? Tell us your story in the comments below, and don't forget to ring that notification bell for more incredible true stories about the courage it takes to finally be yourself.